Hey there. So it's Valentine's Day, and we're probably going to do another update soon, but I want to just touch base here and talk with you guys again about where I'm at faith-wise. And one of the things that I've actually struggled with for a long time, but this journey has really brought it to the forefront, is a simple thing. Two sayings that I want to encourage us to rethink, because as a Christian, I have said these myself, and I have talked with non-believers who are really turned off by these kinds of conversations, and I didn't really get it. Now I think I get it. So hopefully I'm not going to offend anyone. And if you're like, oh, but everyone says those things, I'm like, yeah, what I'm going to talk about, everybody says, I've said it. And so I think what I'm just going to do is caution us how to use these. So I'll just start with two simple things. One of the phrases is, oh, this is a God thing. And the second one is, okay, let's just start for this is a God thing. That means that everything has fallen into place. There's been sort of no obstacles. Things just went along smoothly, and therefore it must be a God thing. Or everything turned out exactly how we wanted, therefore it's a God thing. And the other one is, hey, we prayed for this and God answered our prayers. And usually they mean, I prayed about this and God gave me exactly what I wanted, maybe more. And so I'm going to talk about why those two things really, really bother me. When it comes to it's a God thing, explain to me then which things are not God things. Like, I understand evil is not a God thing, but at what point then are we going to say God uses some things and doesn't use other things? And like, at what point are we going to draw the line and say, okay, well, this is enough evil, or this is a little bit evil, or like, where is the thing that it's suddenly not a God thing? I have lived through some pretty hard things, and there's people who lived through a lot harder things than I have. And we might say, oh, that wasn't a God thing. But let me tell you, there were a lot of really hard things in my life that in the moment I would not have said, oh, this is a God thing. But I can tell you today that absolutely they were God things. He was working in my life when I couldn't see it. And he was actually changing my character, changing my belief system. He was giving me, I'm hoping you guys can hear me, I'm in my car. God was giving me things to hold on to, things to believe in, giving me bits and pieces of his character that I wouldn't have understood any other way. So in James, it says that we need to be thankful. We need to be thankful for all the things. It says that in Philippians as well. That we need to be thankful for all things. Why? Because we don't understand. We don't understand the whole sovereign God, big God, a God who's bigger than this universe. He's huge. He created it with a breath. That's it. And somehow now something good happens in my life and it's a God thing. I would like to think that there are actually things in our lives that happen that we might actually think are not good. For example, a car crash. Why could a car crash be a God thing? Well, you know what? There are people who have been in car accidents who have said, if I hadn't been in that car accident, or if I hadn't been in this terrible situation, I would have been in a different situation that would have been worse. But we don't often know that until much later. And quite honestly, we are so narrow-minded and small. We are human. We are so small, we can't see the big picture. So this whole it's a God thing also tends to mean that when good things happen to me and they are God things, then when good things don't happen to you, then you don't have God things, which means that somehow you must be out of touch with God. And that is not true. And I think that we have perpetuated that by, I think it's like a wing of the prosperity gospel thing that says, oh, when good things happen, it's God. And when it's not a good thing, according to me, according to us, when it's not a God thing, then surely it's from the enemy. It's from the devil. So we need to fight it. And I think that's wrong. When we look at the story of Job, like he sat in the ashes, and these things were they a God thing? Well, he certainly allowed them. But in the moment when Job lost his everything, his living, his children, all that he owned, would he have said, oh, this is a God thing? Actually, he did. But we wouldn't today. So when we got a cancer diagnosis, is this a God thing? Yeah, it is. Because he said yes to it. So if he said yes to it, it's a God thing. Does it feel like it's a God thing? No, it doesn't feel like a God thing because it doesn't feel like a good thing. And so we need to be very careful about how we're using the thing. Oh, this is a God thing that happened. We also need to be very careful about saying, I prayed and God answered. I had enough faith and God answered. And we know that, yes, sometimes we have a lot of faith. We know scripture says that we need to ask with faith and that he will give us because of our faith. We also know that we need to be persistent and keep asking and keep asking and keep asking. But we also know that God answers us all the time. God answers. I can promise you that he answers. But just like any parent, God sometimes says no. God sometimes says maybe. God sometimes says later. God sometimes says, I'll let you decide. And so there are parts of this thing that where we say, oh, God answered prayer. We only say that when it's how we wanted it. So, for example, if you have been praying, I'm like praying for healing. If you've been praying for healing and you've been praying and you've been fasting and it doesn't happen, what I hear people say is God hasn't answered our prayer yet. And I think that's not true. I think that it's very likely God has answered the prayer and he has said, not yet, not now. Maybe he has said no. But to say that God hasn't answered means that he's not paying attention, that your prayers don't avail much. And so then it means that I am the problem if God is not giving me what I want. And so as a Christian, I think that's not true. That's not in line and in fitting with the character of God that I know. The God that we know is loving. He is love. He is love. He's not even just loving. He is love. He is the embodiment of love. He is also goodness. He is the embodiment of good. And so when we say, and he says in the scripture that if someone asks me for like bread, would I give him a stone? No, he's a good father and he gives us good gifts. So when he says no to us, it's for a good reason. When he says wait, it's for a good reason. When he says maybe later or not now, or I will, but it's going to look differently. Or maybe he's like, absolutely. And here's more on top of that. We are at the, sort of at the point where we have to understand that God's goodness toward us is like a parent to a child. It's not always going to feel good in the moment. And it might not feel exactly like we wanted because we are, again, short-sighted. We're human. We err. Like we make mistakes. We're screwed up. We live in a fallen world. And all we can see from this side of heaven is how do we put all together these broken parts and make it good? Because all we see and all we have access to are broken parts. But God, in his infinite wisdom, can see the whole picture from beginning to end. He sees all the parts that are broken. He can fix them. He can put them back together and he can create something new. He can give us things that we haven't even known to ask for. So if we would say, I prayed and God answered, when God has said no, or when God said not now, or maybe, or later, or it's going to look different, we would be much more authentic and true to the God of the Bible. And I think we need to be more honest with ourselves. Because when someone says to us, ooh, we prayed for this and God answered our prayer, and he said no, we don't know what to do with that. And so we don't know what to do with trials and tribulations. And part of the problem of that is we don't know how to honor those who are suffering. Scripture says that we need to give them a place of honor in the church. And we don't know how to do that because we're not comfortable with suffering. We're not comfortable with God saying no. And we're not comfortable with God allowing pain and allowing suffering. And I think the reason that we're uncomfortable with that is we actually don't even understand eternity, because we can't see beyond where we are today. And so anyway, this whole idea of, I prayed and God answered. Yeah, he did. Like, clearly you had a good yes answer. But let's be really careful how we use that, because when we use that, then we are also indicating that those who prayed and did not get what they wanted, that God did not answer their prayer. And that's not true. So I would like to put a challenge out there. And I'd like us to grow. If we're going to be a community of believers who are truly authentic to a God who is good, a God who is loving, who is attentive to his children, and who cares for them moment by moment by moment. He cares about their grief. He cares about our pain. He cares about our joy and our pleasure. If we really believe in that kind of God, then let's start changing our way of speaking to match our belief. So here's a challenge for you. If you can, send me a private message or write down the comments and say, I prayed for whatever it is you prayed for. And then, but God said yes, God said no, God said maybe, God said later, or God answered and it looked different than I wanted. Okay? Let's give God credit for the goodness he's doing, even when it doesn't look like what we wanted it to look like. Because let's face it, we're human, we're finite, and we don't know. And then also, remember that it's a God thing, even if it's a hard thing. So I know the things we're going through right now are kind of hard, but we have peace. We know where we're going. So guess what? This is a God thing. It's a miracle to walk through this kind of situation and have as much peace as we do. So anyway, thanks for your prayers. I hope that challenged your thinking a little bit. And yeah, just think through your life, think through the last few days, the things you've been praying and begging for, the things you've been fasting and praying for. And so far, you've been saying God hasn't answered you, but maybe he has. Maybe that answer is no, not now, maybe later, maybe not at all. So I'd love to hear from you. All right, take care.